Okay, can we just go around once, because some of us don't know each other, and just say who we are and what we do, and then we'll get started. Let's see. Beth, you want to go first? I think your mic's off, Beth.
Okay. Beth Torciello, Ventnor, NJOP member, Sandy survivor.
Great. Who wants to go next?
You can call him out, Scott.
Scott Bernstein, everything that Neil just described, and it's been my great fortune to be helping Chief Man at the moment on their aspirations as well. And we'll hear a little bit more about that later. Let's see, I'll pick on Jack. Jack, say hi to everybody.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jack Chen. I'm the director of the Price Institute. I'm actually trained as a historian, but really what I care about is how to connect communities. I've done a lot of work in Chinatown, for example, in the Asian American community, and resources to make things happen. Good to see everybody.
Nice haircut. Hi, everybody. I'm Chief Man. Yeah.
That's enough, Chief, wasn't it? Just saying we all know who you are. I'm Jody Stewart. I'm lead organizer with New Jersey Organizing Project and New Jersey Resource Project, working on storm organizing recovery and also sea level rise and renewable energy. I'm from South Jersey, and I'm also a Superstorm Sandy survivor. And I'm going to just popcorn this because that'll make it easier. I'm going to popcorn it over to Fran.
Hello, I'm Fran Baranowitz. I'm a Sandy survivor. I live in Ventnor, New Jersey, which is right next to Atlantic City. I live a half a block from the Back Bay. So when the full moon comes out, like last night, and the new moons, if there's a storm in the area, it's flooded in front of my house. They are working on the street now. After Sandy, when they raised a lot of houses, mine included, they finished off the street, but they didn't finish it properly. So the water doesn't run off. It just stays in the middle of the road. And a man across the street sold his house recently, and he was determined to write, "My house is for sale." It's a it's a waterfront project, but it's one of those things. We're all for mitigation. We're all trying to save the area so that we can get through.
Thank you, Fran.
Thank you.
Megan, you're also with NJOP.
Yes, I am. Hi, my name is Megan. I'm a community captain with the New Jersey Organizing Project. I work on, I'm a primarily storm organizing like Jody, and a little bit of elections. Yeah, I will popcorn it to John.
John Pulaski. I've lived in Waretown for 31 years now. I'm just a activist resident here and there. I don't exactly have a title, but I'm interested. I have a lot of friends. I didn't have any problems with Superstorm Sandy, fortunately, but a lot of friends and neighbors had, so I'm interested in the issues.
Gisa or Kevin, either one.
Kevin, finally getting to meet you on screen here. So anyway, good to meet everyone. I work in Central Jersey. I've been a Princeton area resident on and off for 53 years now. So I feel that I'm really mostly a New Jerseyan, and I'm excited to be working with all of you, and I'm curious to hear what everyone has to say.
Hi, my name is Pat Kennedy. I'm a resident of Waretown. I had lived in North Jersey most of my life. Moved down here This was about 6 years ago, and got involved with NJOP and got to know some of the people who have been affected by Sandy.
Who hasn't gone?
iPad.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I have a new iPad. My name is Jamie Harrison. I have no idea how to make the iPad say who I am. So I'm just seem to be anonymous iPad, but I also live in Waretown and have been involved. I've been here for 18 years. So I've seen a lot of changes in terms of sea level, if you will, and things that have happened around the town. So my interest is just as a citizen in trying to be involved in projects that will be helpful to the community and different aspects of the community who need help all the time. I'm happy to be here. They were very interesting presentations, very interesting. So welcome.
And I think it's just myself and Bob and Jillian. Bob, another distinguished faculty person. I feel dwarfed by you and Jack. Your mic is off, Bob.
Yeah, there's no community that I know of that you should feel dwarfed in, Kevin. I'm Bob Goodman. For 15 years until a year ago in June, I was the executive dean of the School of Environmental and Biological Sciences and director of the New Jersey Agricultural Experiment Station. During my leave last year and continuing, I've gotten involved with Jack and the Price Institute and Scott and a bunch of other folks, some of whom are involved in this conversation. And I'm just thrilled to be a quiet party to this conversation this afternoon. Please forgive my in and out. I'm a bit mobile. I had a couple of other obligations that I've minimized but not eliminated to be able to participate. So I'll try not to be disruptive, and thank you all for what you're doing. And I've been to Weirtown, and I did get through Sandy. Thanks.
And I think is that everyone? I think so, Scott. Kevin Lyons, Rutgers Business School. I was introduced earlier, so no need to add anything more. The one thing I can tell you is that I have been involved with the offshore wind from the disparities perspective. I did a disparity study for the New Jersey Economic Development Authority to make sure that women-owned and diverse-owned companies and businesses are going to be a part of that project. So I'm monitoring it. I wrote the study. I know that they are available. They can do work. They can do the job, but I'll be there throughout the entire process as long as I'm around to make sure that they adhere to it as well.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody. It's wonderful to see you. I participated in the South Jersey discussion, the prior meeting that we had, and I think the world needs to know that not everything was fixed after Hurricane Sandy. You were all quite passionate about how long it not only has taken, but it's still taking. And I think it was a compelling set of stories. We're here today, though, to hear some articulations of some projects that you would like to make happen. And they can be in whatever stage they are, but much like my challenging statement to Tobias a few minutes ago, I'm interested in where you think it might go if successful. Funders, whether they're foundations or federal agencies, in my experience, increasingly want to buy outcomes, not just invest in an organization for who they are. We're at a point in history where they're willing to tolerate or maybe even embrace the idea of diversity, and therefore startup projects have a chance potentially. I'm not going to lay out what kind of money is available, except to say on the federal and state side, more than you could use. So we'll be talking later about some ways to help lower barriers to getting access to that. So here the question is, what kinds of projects are represented here and what would you like to see happen? So anybody who feels like they are ready to jump into this conversation, let's have a, I don't want to say first victim, but first volunteer, because we're here to actually help and help sharpen through Q&A and some peer-to-peer observations too. The chances of making it compelling enough to get support. So do we have a volunteer for this? Or somebody who maybe isn't applying for money right now, but could, as Tobias and Chief Mann did, give us a story about something that worked really well that might be relevant here.
I can start you out with one of the communities, and it's Ware Town. And brings it together with the offshore wind also. Ware Town is a very small community that was affected. Some of the community was affected very badly by Sandy, and they still experience flooding, not just sea level rise, but rain runoff. And it's just a very small community. Orsted, which is doing ocean wind, is going to run transmission lines through their town. So the first thing we thought of right away is, how does this community also benefit from all the needs they have with the offshore wind? And then I'm also going to bring Pat Kennedy into it. And since then, I spoke to Pat Kennedy about it, a resident who came up with the needs of their community. So how do we also not only get Orsted to contribute to some of this, but how do we find funding to also take care of other needs of that community? And Pat, would you like to go further with this? Bring yourself off mute. You did it.
Yeah. Well, it was at your urging that I got involved in this, Jody, obviously. Having been here for, like I said, 6 years, I have learned a lot about what's gone on in the town and what's going on now, which is a lot of building. And along with a lot of building comes the problem of more flooding, which is something that we definitely don't want. I think number one on my list at this point, I think, would probably be getting funding for more green acres to prevent some of the building that potentially is coming, because there are for sale signs up all over town on the large pieces of vacant property. That would be my number one. Other people in town who would have number one on their list would be flooding issues that they have on sunny days. Jamie and I had gone down on the Halloween, the day after we had the crazy windstorm. We'd gone riding around looking at decorations, and down by the bay, there were streets that you could tell that they had flooded the day before. There was seaweed, sand, mud all over. And there are other areas of town too that are a couple of blocks from the water, where on rainy, if we have an inch of rain, people get water in their homes. And they've gone to the town. One particular street, the town's response is, well, it's not our street, it's a county road, so we can't do anything about it. Our hands are tied. I don't know if the person has gone to the county or not. John, you may know more about that than I do. But there are people who have definite needs in terms of trying to live a normal life without having to worry every time that it rains that their house is going to flood.
Pat, has it been your experience that you've raised these issues and you don't get responses, or you get responses such as it's somebody else's responsibility, or all of the above? I mean,
Well, I had been attending town council meetings up until a couple of years ago, and things in my life changed and I wasn't able to do it for a while. And what I found going to the meetings, anytime anybody brought anything up at a town council meeting that they were having a problem with, the town's response generally is, we can't do anything about it.
Yeah, there
Okay.
was one individual that's not here, just a local guy in town. He was the main voice of saying this particular road was getting flooded out. And that was the end result of he was a little unorthodox, we'll put it that way. But his complaints were the final result was we can't do anything about it, that it's the county's problem. And I don't believe, to the best of my knowledge, he went to the county, but I don't know what goes on behind closed doors there.
There are areas, there are areas of the town for whatever reason that it's unexplained. Well, no, the reason is some of these smaller developments that were built, I think when they were built, nobody bothered keeping track of what was going on in terms of whether or not proper drainage was being put in. And I think some of these streets, that is the problem, that they don't have a storage system for water runoff, that they never did. They were built without it. It would be a tremendous cost, obviously, to do something about that now. But the town doesn't want to get involved in any way.
So in terms of something you imagine happening here that would be definitive and affirmative and accountable, and as you put it, Jody, what I heard was also sensitive to community benefits more broadly and co-benefits. You know, if you could get something going, whose project would it be, and who would be playing what roles?
I don't know.
Yeah, I like how you say that. Though NJOP and NJRP are the organizations backing, of course, we would stay as a main role of it with the community members, of course, during a role. And one of our goals was that Pat Kennedy, though I have never propositioned her to this moment, would be one of the main people who is also working with that. But NJOP would be the support system.
So do you think something needs to get created to do this work? Or do you think that with enough pressure, I guess, you could get the city to play a lead role? I mean, how, remember, I'm gonna role play here. I'm the guy back here wondering, is there somewhere to park the money so we can make this miracle happen?
Absolutely.
And, yeah.
I do believe, and thank you, Pat, for telling me that one street was a county road, which I did not know. I do believe I've been in negotiations already with Orsted that can solve maybe one or two streets of a problem, but not on a whole. But with the green acres and the slowly stopping the development, because remember that community is a very small area on the bay, and every time you develop, you're just taking more and more away. One of
And
my
it's landlocked too. I mean, we're
Right.
landlocked between Route 9 and the Parkway for the most part.
One of my thinking is even developing more of a living shoreline out there that would protect the water that comes in from the bay. We don't even have a plan in motion yet, and would not have been even able to start a plan unless we have people helping us on that. We just don't have the capacity to do it all.
I want to dominate the questions here. Kevin or Nagisa or Bob, what
Yeah.
questions go through your mind when you hear this proposition here that it's clear some actions needed, they're at risk? What do we do about this? And,
Yeah, a couple questions, quick ones though. Are you currently, or have you been involved with or collaborating with an academic institution that could probably take on some of the research and maybe some of the grant writing and some of the other maybe preliminary work that needs to be done before the expensive, consultants and all those kind of folks come on board?
We're going to say we're in the preschool stage, which
Okay.
means we have not met with anyone or spoke to anyone. This is the first time we're speaking with anyone.
Okay, so that's one area that we can definitely help. And then you had mentioned Orsted a couple times, and they have, I know, all of the developers, a community improvement component to all their work. And we don't want to push that to the background, meaning that if you're going to come into anybody's community to benefit themselves, in a sense, to get these lines through, then that's an opportune time for them to make improvements as well, whether that be, like you said, designing wetlands, going back to what the land was before it became so overdeveloped. And so it can start to capture some of that excess water and basically do something of an improvement while they're still getting, in a sense, what they need, which is access. So that might be a definite piggyback that needs to be, because the offshore wind is going to happen. I mean, there's so much funding being pumped into that, and I don't see why this could not be a opportunity to take advantage of that as well.
Absolutely. That's what we see it as also with Orsted, because those lines, since I thank you for letting me know that you also know enough about the offshore wind. We do know that the transmission lines are Ocean City and Waretown, and luckily the town of Waretown is also very cooperative. They just want to see that they can benefit from it also.
From what the meetings I attended, I don't know if it's being too well received.
In Waretown?
Yeah.
Better than Ocean City. And I think the problem is the lack of communication. Orsted has not played a major role talking to the average person on the street. That is unfortunate on their part, where Atlantic Shores is playing more of a role on talking to you all.
Well, they did hold a couple of meetings that were well attended, but then COVID hit.
How would your town be receptive if they knew things were coming for them?
Well, I had spoken to one of the township committee members just last evening. I was having trouble finding this person, and they didn't seem to know anything. Know what I was talking about. I don't know if I don't want to
exactly
dime the person out, but they said no, the lines aren't coming through Waretown, but that's what I hear is happening. So I don't know why the township representative doesn't know this.
Exactly. The reason you all know is because we came to you, and JOP came to you. That is the reason you all are aware what's going on. The representatives of your town are probably not knowing what's going on, but as of now,
At least one of them was at the meetings, though.
Okay, as of January, they will be telling everybody where the lines are going through. That's
so is that true for all these towns that the wind
that
developers?
is true only for Ocean City and Waretown lines, transmission lines.
All right.
And this is a federally funded project.
I believe, I believe the offshore wind farms are funded by federal.
Yeah, part of a combination of federal and state. So the state of New Jersey has pumped a significant amount of money into it, and the federal government has recently opened up the floodgates on funding for not only New Jersey but basically the East Coast as far as these offshore wind projects. So there's definitely an opportunity, as I said, to piggyback off of the funding that's, going to make this offshore wind happen, where you can't go into an area, disrupt it just for your own purpose, and then not, do anything in the sense to improve. And again, the idea of recreating the natural wetlands, green acre sites, and basically giving back what used to be there. So it's almost so that even though there's transmission lines running, that you can't really tell or shouldn't be able to tell that there's anything that's there. It should be.
Is that the infrastructure bill include any of this? Or is that?
Oh, yeah, quite a bit. But let me just ask one more question, Kevin. So is the state also granting a license here for this? What is it, BPU?
It's a combination of both. So NJEDA as well as BPU are overseeing these projects. Right. So there's a state interest in making sure that things are done right. They're still in the very early stages where they're, sending out RFPs for developments and really ramping up and whatnot. But this is the time when these big decisions need to be made, like now.
Right. Jody, if I was in your position, and I've been in it before, running an organizing program, I would take a good look at what's called the New Jersey Energy Master Plan and the components of that were recently adopted in the name of community energy projects.
Okay.
So there's a precedent there for local utility projects. They're marrying traditional construction of lines and plants with construction of non-traditional commitments. Community solar projects is one, but energy efficiency is another, but the principle's already been set that community benefits need to, I think, be associated with main lines of business here, particularly if they result in broader energy benefits too, which things like energy efficiency and clean energy do, and that might give you a little extra leverage on it. I have a question about this proposition that you can hold back the sea, just to play devil's advocate. And I've done design work on this, but how far along is the thinking on this in South Jersey? I mean, I heard people talk about it a little bit a few months ago when we held the meeting. I've been familiar with the in-depth design work that's gone on up in northern New Jersey and in New York. But has somebody actually evaluated these sites and said, hey, this is what you need to do here, or here's what your options are?
From my knowledge, the only thing I have heard about is the back bay studies that
Okay.
they've been doing. And again, they're talking floodgates, things of that nature. I personally don't think that would work or be very effective in South Jersey, but that's just a personal opinion.
Right.
One of the reasons why I asked if it was a federally funded project is because every federally funded project, talking about the state of New Jersey, all 3 indigenous tribes in the state of New Jersey should get a notice of this project going to happen, right? And we are activated into that through the 106 process. So given where you're talking about, I can only imagine, you know, the presence of our ancestors in that area at certain times of the year. And so what ends up happening is that you're not standing alone at that point. What will happen at that point is that we can interject ourselves in there to make sure that through mitigation efforts, right, that there is those places set aside for, you know, indigenous people, but you know, just looking at it from this point of view, right? For us to be able to go there, you know, to, you know, be in that sacred space, right? So there is that aspect, right? That's number one. No, and I would be willing to be party to that. Number two is I'm sure that Ware Town has elections. Right.
Yes, they do, and they elect the same people over and over and over again, and then complain about it 3 days later.
Right. Well, but my point about that is that, you know, if there are people that are there who are so inclined to put themselves in a position to be those people who actually should be in that position to make the right decisions for the community, then that is something that also needs to be focused on and looked at as an option to the obstacle.
Great idea, Chief, man. Picking up on Kevin's suggestion for a role for universities, and I'm doing this long distance. I'm in Evanston, next to Chicago, but I feel like I live on the far west side of Newark because so. But I've met some great people at Rutgers who do have a critical ability to take a look at situations like different types of oceanfront flooding and impermeability, and which sounds like you have a severe case of, and sort of ask the tough questions to make sure that you get something that's actually worth it. So Bob Kopp runs the climate research program at Rutgers. Dan Van Abs, who does an excellent job at looking at water bill utility impacts, and any local shares for these kinds of projects end up almost invariably on the water bill. I know Dan's already analyzed trends in water bills in your part of New Jersey. Up north, Amy Chester, Rebuild by Design, was sort of the ringmaster on under the Obama administration. There was this public-private partnership to try and figure out how to build disaster resilience into communities. And if NJOP doesn't have contact with her, then maybe we can help you with that one. And speaking personally, where I used to be, the Center for Neighborhood Technology, cnt.org, just go /water. And there's a couple of recent guides on financing these projects, case studies of what groups are doing. And if you look up something called the Values of Green Infrastructure, it's a guidebook on how to line out the co-benefits, the community benefits, if you will, on these projects so that they have a greater chance of getting taken seriously. So it sounds to me like what you're calling for is a process that would not leave it up for grabs or up to chance, that there will be accountability for both future prevention of flooding, knowing that it's going to keep happening, that it would address flooding in its multiple aspects, which could be as simple as somebody not grading or permeating the street right, or it could be as complicated as differentiating between sunny day flooding and wind-driven flooding that happens during hurricanes, which you are prone to in South Jersey. And that would get around the problem of everybody pointing like this. It's somebody else's problem to do it, that hopefully that you could get some sort of compact or agreement from responsible bodies to work on this, create room at the table for new investors in the area like Orsted, and come up with a tangible role for community residents to be beneficiaries of this as well. Somebody hinted a minute ago that there's going to be jobs out of all this, for example. Who's going to get them, right? What businesses are going to be qualified to contract for it? To answer the question, yes, there is a lot of money going into clean energy transmission, distribution, packaging, along with energy efficiency. This stuff has to be built in most cases. You can't do electric vehicles without more electric distribution and transmission capacity, for example. And the streets are going to have to be redone. And I'll go down the list of some of the target programs later.
Scott?
Yes.
It's Nagisa.
Hi, Nagisa. There you are. Good to see you in person, finally.
Yeah. So this may or may not be helpful, but not all of Rutgers is up in New Brunswick. And in fact, my husband is acting as the director of the Tuckerton station right now. So I would suggest you team up with them, because I think they're right there. They're really near you. They struggle through many of the same challenges you all do as residents, because that station is not even reachable half the time because of all the
I know, it's 2 miles from my house.
Yeah. So Jody, I don't know if it's helpful, but I think there are a lot of smart oceanographers at that station, and I would suggest you reach out to them and see
That
if
would
you
be
can't
great.
start building a partnership with them. You know, it's like, I'm sorry, my husband's going to kill me. I'm adding to his workload, but I think he really does care what your situation is.
You're too late, Nagisa. We're recording this. So it's
Yes, I am from Little Egg Harbor, Mystic Island, which is right down the road from there. So yes, that would be a great connect. I mean, I can just drop in and really freak them out someday. So that would be really good. But we also have another
in fact,
we also have another community that will want to have a voice in this, and that's a Ventnor City. And Ventnor will let Beth explain what they go through in their community. But thank you for that. Yes.
Yeah, because the notion is not just Tuckerton, but I think it might be helpful to broaden your lens and team up with a whole bunch of towns along that same area who are faced with the same issue, because it's not specific to your town.
No, it's all the Back Bay towns are experiencing this in the South Jersey area.
I mean, you know,
to that point, Nagisa, the New Jersey Department of Environment, or whatever it's called, announced recently a partnership for Northeast New Jersey, Newark, and a bunch of the surrounding towns. Ironbound Community Corporation is part of it. But the footnote was more interesting. They say they committed to doing these all over the state. So I think you want to know about that, Jody, because they're funding these partnerships to do the planning that's necessary, and unlike some of these, it sounds like they're not taking forever. It was just announced, and the stated intent was to have an outcome by May 1st on this in terms of an agreed upon plan. So there may be some resources there.
I can reach out to Maria over at Ironbound.
Yes,
We
that would
do
be
work
good.
with her.
Right.
Yes.
That would be good. And I'd also urge you to take the time to just look at what it said in the press release that was put out by the mayor's office in Newark, and also the description of that program in the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, because I think it was revealing.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Jamie.
I'd just like to offer another partner potentially would be the Jacques Cousteau National Estuarine, whatever. There's a JCNERR on Great Bay Boulevard in Tuckerton, and they are a federal, they have a federal connection. I'm not sure exactly what it is. And the other one would be Stockton State University. They do a lot of environmental work, and they're not too far. They're part of, to your point about broadening out, they may want to have input also.
Yeah, Rutgers should definitely collaborate with them. And then the project that you mentioned is part of NOAA and Rutgers. And
Right.
So, yeah, there's a lot of resources. We just need to get them aligned, get them on the
Right.
same page, and make this a priority, not just sort of a fun project. This is a national priority, I think. And this is the time to do it, since all the eyes are focused in this space. So I really want to sort of push this to the forefront and get the kind of attention that is needed like immediately, because if not, then some other crises or some other thing is going to.
Good frame, Kevin. So let's say that was to happen, that you started calling around and found out there was some broad agreement here that something could be done, not just that something needs to be done along the lines we were talking about. Who would take the lead at convening folks? Who would be the responsible party for making sure a draft happened and you could build consensus on it? And, from there, you'd have to figure out who was eligible for the funding, depending on the program. I mean, the federal legislation did drop a number of barriers. For the first time, nonprofit organizations are eligible for a lot of these grants, but partnerships are also encouraged. And you've got to show you can actually do the program. It's not worth doing it. So who's the prime mover here to make something happen?
Well, I think the prime rulers are the community itself. I mean, I know that it's hard to, jump out in front and take the voice, but, we could work with the mayor and the folks in the town to make them, raise the level of heightened, but we need to then jump in to support them. So if it doesn't come from the towns or the towns collectively, then it's just another academic institution coming in and acting as though they know everything. So,
we got a hand raised over here. I think iPad. Sorry, I missed your name.
She had her hand still up.
Your mic's off.
I think that was an old hand raise. I think she
Okay.
said.
Yeah, I didn't raise my hand.
It's raised.
I think that Beth might want to explain her community, I think is what I'm getting.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping. Beth, do you want to tell you and Fran, explain what's going on in your communities right now?
All right, well, I'll start. Can you hear me? Am I off mute?
Good.
All right, I'll start, and Fran could, come in after, because we live on different parts of Ventnor. So she's on the mainland by the Back Bay, and I'm on the island by the Back Bay. So we face different things. The things that really I've noticed over the years is that our flooding or towns flooding mitigation answer is to come with their trucks and just clean out the sewers like they did. That's it. That's, I mean, and that's, it's just not acceptable. They need to identify the streets that flood and they need to be fixed. I think with the infrastructure bill that, was just passed, I mean, is there any money allocated for things like this? And if not, can we get some to address this?
Yes.
And
Yes,
so,
yes.
I mean, I think the cities have a responsibility to identify these streets, whether they are or not, I don't know, and to do something about it. We have, the Black Horse Pike down by Vagabonds, if anybody, by the Atlantic City Airport there, the little airport, that closes down, when, they have to close the roads. They have to close the road, going into Pleasantville, because it floods out. I mean, it's just constant. And the manpower that they put behind the barricading and the police stopping and over years and years and years, it just seems wasteful if they could just fix it. Take some of this infrastructure money and fix these areas.
Okay, so let me real briefly, there is a lot of money labeled stormwater management. There's even money labeled Healthy Streets pilot program. To make sure that the co-benefits get addressed. There's also underutilized money, frankly, sitting at the state of New Jersey in what's called the Clean Water Revolving Loan Fund. And it can be either for zero interest loans, or if you can show that part of the community meets a disadvantaged community frame, you can convert those into grants instead of loans. And there's underutilized money for water and sewer purposes, which includes the stuff we're talking about sitting in the American Rescue Plan funds that were given to the state of New Jersey, the county you're in, and any of the towns that are 50,000 or more, which may not be yours, but the other sources definitely. And that's all going to get decided on what to do with the rest of it in the next few months. So I would say there's no time to waste in terms of framing your proposition and getting out there and starting to make the rounds. So yes, on the money, but there's got to be somebody to give it to. Yes, the city's responsible for their streets. My guess is there's some sort of water district or county responsibility in there too that needs to be tied down, and you got to get them in the room at the same time. To set a time frame and an agreement to do just what was said, something that'll work, not just what the easiest thing to get away with is. And
I have a question when you're finished.
I'm done.
Okay. If you know this, shouldn't they know this?
Well, my guess is some people do know it and they think they can bide their time and do some other projects with it. Others, actually, it's been a long time since there's been more money than they've known what to do with, and they don't know what to do, and they could use some cover. It wouldn't hurt if there was,
takes them a while. Excuse me, it takes them a while. Like my neighbor across the street moved out of his house last November, and 2 years before that, he was complaining about the runoff in front of his house. He even tried drilling with drills himself, but they finally started it on the 16th of this month. They started digging and doing. I don't know how they're going to change the street because the water is so high in the bay, and we're just a half a block away. When the water comes up through the drains, it just keeps coming. And that's the problem with us. Now, how they're going to raise us, I don't know. I tried talking to these people, but they don't know, the ones that are working. How do they know? It's these, it's the people that are doing it, the engineers that set it up. And I know they started doing the street a couple blocks over and a block down. And now they did it one day.
Okay, who's going to carry this conversation on to Mira, who's going to join you now? I'm going to switch over.
Okay, thank you.
Her group. But you're very welcome, but just, do what I said. Tell people what, where you've come to. You've got some ideas of a project that have come out of this. You need to get organized around it. And get her ideas. She's one of the best in the country on this. I'm working with her now as part of a cohort of 52 groups, just like yours. So maybe we can get somewhere. So I think I'm going to have to disappear. You're very welcome, but you'll hear from me again later about where the money is. Okay?
Thank you, Scott.
Yes, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Just to let everyone know before Tamara gets here, I've been taking copious notes about the academic involvement and who should be involved. So I'll keep that list going for when we need to, and I'll be the one to reach out to all the academic units so you guys don't have to. I'll do it on behalf of the team here.
So Kevin, could I just follow up on a couple of points that relate to that?
Sure.
So Nagisa introduced this. Her husband, Oscar Schofield, who chairs Marine and Coastal Sciences at Rutgers, New Brunswick. Once someone contacts him and you dig in, you're going to discover that there's a deep bench of oceanographers and physical scientists and other people involved with Ørsted, involved with the biology of the offshore area, the shelf, that are involved in this in terms of fisheries, in terms of marine mammals and birds and other factors involved. So it's just a very strong group that I'm sensing the public participants in this discussion are less familiar with. JC Near is a great idea. The core issue there is estuarian research, but also education. It's also part of Rutgers. We have a very strong program there. There are the dormitories for people to stay for week-long conferences, and it's about education of students and the public and civic leaders that could play a really important role in helping adjudicate many of the issues, some of them contentious, that are going to continue to arise around this. Earlier in the conversation, there was some mention, maybe it was you, Kevin, or Scott, about accountability. And I just want to take a moment to briefly say that after Sandy, and following on some other discussions that my wife and I made about our home, which is along the canal, the DNR Canal in Franklin Township, Somerset. We had to go before the Canal Review Board. We're also in a historic district, so we had issues there. We wanted to make an addition to our home so we could age in place. And we happily went to board meetings and happily provided information, and were required to do a bunch of things which we agreed in writing to do. So that was 5 years ago. No follow-up. I'm talking about accountability. No accountability has been required of us for the commitments that we agreed to make. Rain gardens, size of the structure, impervious cover. And we did all the things that we were required to do, but there's no accountability. I'm a huge believer in local government, but it seems to me that especially in these bigger issues that go beyond a property owner or even a township, we need to have a higher level of respect for self-accountability, yes, but also government accountability. So that's just a little piece off my chest.
Tamira, welcome. I'm really glad you could join us. We had a little bit of a lopsided discussion, so we thought it might be good to kind of pick up with the last group that was speaking about their issues, if that's okay, and then maybe you can help us with that part of it, and then we can go back to the other groups. You can hear both groups as well. So Franny and Beth, I don't know if you want to continue talking and maybe give
Okay, if you
Tamira a
want.
little bit of background. Yep.
Okay,
You do.
I'm Fran.
I'm Beth.
Hi.
Hi.
I was talking about, I live a half a block from the Back Bay. We have, if it's full moon, we can have flooding right in front of my house, can go all the way up to the corner. Sometimes it goes up to the second block. And this has been going on, it's new moons and full moons, and then storms. And I had my house raised after Sandy. And when I stand on the porch, I can see the level of the Back Bay, the water, how high it is at high tide. So, I mean, the boats look like they're going to come right out of the water when they come by. But we're worried about, they didn't finish off the streets properly after Sandy, after they resurfaced them when people had their homes raised like I did. What they were doing at the time, the gas company was going around putting in new gas meters. So each house had to have it put in. And now they're doing the street in front of my house. And they've got yellow flags where the gas meters are. And they're concerned about it. So, but we're concerned about how they're going to resurface the street outside. And when they did it one day, the 16th of November, they did it. They did a few lines up and down the street. They've marked the street with orange paint, but they gave us notes that we can't park in front of our houses, but they're not doing anything. So that's what I'm concerned about.
Yeah, and for me, if I could jump in, Fran,
Yeah.
My street floods, and I've been here 20 years and it's flooded, since I came here. In fact, my realtor said, this street, she wanted to let me know that it was known for flooding. I don't flood as bad as Fran does, but I'm in the same situation. I'm a half a block from the bay. And if we have a nor'easter, even in the winter, I could just watch the water coming up the street with the ice chunks just moving up the street. And my question is, with the infrastructure bill and all that, if there's money in there, shouldn't the towns identify the streets that have issues and, address them, and fix them? We have roads that, have to be absolutely, we're talking big, like four lane highways that have to be closed down every time there's a high tide with even just a mild storm. They have to be closed down. So is there money there available to address this? And should the cities know about it, or how do we go about getting them to get the money to fix these streets that we live on?
Yeah, there's billions of dollars in the infrastructure bill for water related projects. So flooding, drinking water are two big allocations that are going to flow down to city and state government. Now, what city and state agencies, how ready they are, how ready the projects are, who knows? What I'm seeing is that most cities are not designing for climate resiliency. They haven't, and they're not. Scott just shared this, out of 20,000 local jurisdictions, only 3 have climate resilience plans, 3,000 in the US. So cities are really behind, and maybe not even really thinking about how this most recent infrastructure bill is going to fund some of these projects that, one, need to be community led, because you guys are the experts. You know what flooding's happening, you know how long it's happening, you know how much worse it's getting, you know when it's happening. So I'm really advocating whether cities are ready or not, that communities get ready to help cities identify community-led climate solutions. So I would be looking around. Now you guys are part of this resource project, the New Jersey Resource Project, is that right?
Yes, yes, they are.
Yeah, you have a coalition of really invested folks who could probably identify 4 or 5 projects right now that need to happen with this, and that infrastructure funding can definitely fund. There's FEMA funding, there's EPA funding, there's Build Back Better funding. Funding is, for once, people can't say there isn't funding for this stuff because there's something like 500 billion just for water.
Well,
Yeah, like tracking how that comes down to cities is another thing, and cities have to have some shovel-ready projects.
Now, should the cities know about this? I mean, shouldn't the city, like I asked before, I mean, if you know about it, shouldn't they know about it? And shouldn't they be going after it? Or is it up to us to make them go after it?
Well, definitely there's cities that are positioning themselves for it. Most urban cities know infrastructure funding is coming. It's an allocation bill. It's like funding existing programs. So pots that had a couple million now have 500 million. So, like, there's definitely cities that are readying and coming up with projects and have had projects, whether it be like wastewater, all that stuff. I don't know if Verner City, there are small rural cities that just don't have people on staff who've even written a federal government grant. So I would
Ventnor has people.
Yeah, I wouldn't assume that they're planning. I would find out what they're planning.
We have to talk to the mayor.
Yeah, I would say, look, we're really invested in a community-led planning process that identify those projects that are priority and how they happen. Because what has historically happened is these large infrastructure projects has happened and done more harm than good by not involving community, by not looking at impacts to Black and brown communities. We're not looking at income inequality and how some of these projects are getting designed and workforce development. So it is an opportunity that can go either way. And I'm telling folks, make sure you're organized and you're getting ready. And there is funding for community planning. There's EPA environmental justice grants. There's FEMA flood mitigation grants that have community planning processes as fundable line items. So that's the opportunity here that I hope folks are thinking about, as well as just like, we always need to be pressuring local government to be prioritizing climate resilience solutions that come from community. I
was just at the League of Municipalities conference down in Atlantic City, and I know that the government of Ventnor and Rare Town were there. Now, whether they attended the sessions that were dealing with this particular topic, I can't tell you that. But there was more this year than any year that I've seen on this very specific topic, where municipalities were discussing their plans for flood mitigation and other issues related to their town. So definitely check in with the mayor's office and the council folks there. Number one.
Well, the mayor lives around the corner from me, down and away. I don't know whether she lives on a street that floods. She could, but
sometimes our representatives might be aware but not know what to do also.
Yeah.
So that might be a chance, an opportunity for us to get them up to speed. Maybe that could be step one. So we can, if you guys would be happy to set up a meeting, we could at least sort of bring them up to speed. And then, as Tamara was just saying, then the community has a rallying point of sorts. And, as an institution, we could be there with you. We wouldn't lead it, but we want to be there to support you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
That's great.
As you said, I had mentioned earlier, I forget if you were on here or not, Kevin. Are you going room to room, or have you been here the whole time?
The whole time.
Okay. I had mentioned that I had spoken to some of one of the Ware Town individuals on the committee yesterday, and they didn't seem to know anything about this. When you say it was brought up at the League of Municipalities, which this individual was at, they, I'm just curious what exactly was said. Was anything said? You know, it's just summarized, not the whole thing, but was there anything mentioned about the Orsted offering?
Oh yeah,
or whatever.
yeah. I'll send you the program. I mean, it was really significant, the amount of sessions that were attended to, and they should stop holding it at a casino. These League of Municipalities. Maybe that's part
where
of the
I'm headed
problem.
now, so I'm in the car.
But yeah, I'll send you the information.
Yeah,
I would appreciate that.
Would you or anybody else per se? I think it'd be good to facilitate something between us, quote unquote, the interested citizens and the sitting officials, because the sitting officials don't always get all
Exactly.
citizens. I'm putting that in politely, but I think it's, I mean, to just go right to the committee members, I think it'd be good to have some of the people that are sitting in this room be quote unquote, or for lack of a better word, forced to all sit in the same room, so we can kind of be on the same page.
Yeah.
Sure.
But I can facilitate
also,
some sort of meeting like that.
Yeah, instead of being tied to outcomes, really get them to commit to a process, like a community engagement process that you all are thinking about. Like city government, there's exceptions, are not great at holding community engagement processes. It's usually like the last thing they do on a project to tell you what's happening and get your feedback. That isn't what you guys are asking for. You're asking for a sustained and engaged community-led planning process to identify solutions to, all these community issues that the city is a partner to. They don't, they're very focused on operations. They might be looking even at like flooding at full moon, like that's so beyond their purview that they're not coming up with solutions for that. They might be like, okay, we need to have a sewage treatment plant upgrade project, or we need that, so I think you also have to lay out a model of community engagement that the city's that's not their strength. I would say in most cases. There's a few exceptions, but and there is funding for that. There is Justice 40 initiative is intended to invest in community-led solutions to mitigate historic harms and invest in communities, and to ensure that community is at the table, and that at least 40% of this federal infrastructure funding is going to underinvested communities.
Okay. Jody, show that picture that you had up before when we had.
This is a picture of Fran Street 2 years ago during the Superstorm Sandy. We had to walk to our neighborhood.
We had an anniversary meeting, and that's how Jody got to my house to come to that meeting. This was after, that she was out here on Dorset Avenue. That's a block or two up from me and 4 blocks over. So it was all flooded there. They couldn't drive their car to my house. They had to park on the main road near the beach and then walk back here. Channel 3 was here with their cameras that day, right?
Yeah.
And they took pictures.
I waded through the water to meet Jody. Yeah.
And I do understand that our communities, sometimes they are more focused, our administrators, on just trying to make the town run. So that makes a whole bit of sense to us that we also have to take such a large active role in this, because it takes a lot to keep a community running. So maybe by Fran and Beth and Pat and John and Jamie and all of them working with their community members and working with the administrators, with all your help, maybe solutions can be found and a process can be made.
We'll try.
Yeah, I just put a link to the Marin People's Plan. Jack and John asked me, like, do we have examples of community-led planning around flooding in particular? This is in Marin City, California, which is chronically floods and also is a place of really obvious income disparity between communities that are being impacted by flooding. And we've been supporting Marin City People's Planning efforts to design a community-led planning process to mitigate flooding and really getting city officials to get behind it. And also have been successful getting private philanthropy and some public funding. They have a coastal conservancy grant to do people's planning and empower local community members to become permaculture designers, to really do like watershed flood mitigation projects. Like they're really a great example of what community can do when they lead on planning processes. And they don't always have the city's the city's not, facilitated some meetings where the city planners are like, well, you guys don't know what you're talking about. So the community's like, actually we do. And if you listen, you would, you would see we were actually the experts. We live here. We've been dealing with flooding our whole lives. So there's some education too, but there's lots of models happening of like subverting that top-down planning paradigms to say like community can do their own planning process and get resourced to do that too. I don't know where we are in the mix of projects, if there's other folks who haven't gone yet. Or have you all gone?
Tamir, both projects have now spoken, so maybe you could, so Jody, maybe since you have an overview of both communities and the larger issues that you've been representing and engaged with, it'd be great to maybe have you give us a little overview and insight that from your vantage, and then that would help Tamira and also Kevin and everybody else to weigh in.
Oh, thanks. Wonderful. Get me when I'm not prepared. I appreciate that. Well, as it was
Judy,
brought up,
I have full confidence you know what to say.
well, I'm glad you do. Well, it was brought up today that yes, the problems we are going through on the Jersey Shore, the southern Jersey Shore, is all similar. All the Back Bay communities are having a hard time with localized flooding, may it be sea level rise, or even to the point of rain runoff. We're old communities, we're not young communities, and nothing is equipped, just as mine, that is not part of this project, which might be down the road. But Waretown, again, we have, and I love how the Waretown folks sent me some ideas that they really were looking forward to, not only addressing streets that were town streets, but county streets, and how do we address the rain runoff. I do know the person they're speaking of, that their yard and their home floods all the time. And the town has basically shushed them and thrown them out the door. So we need to address that. And also maybe the living shorelines and building up the wetland areas is part of that for the sea level rise area. And Ventnor Beach, I call it Ventnor Beach, Ventnor City. The town is addressing what they believe they're addressing some of the flooding by raising streets, but is that really addressing the flooding, or is that just regrading? Because all you're doing is running the water off your street into people's properties at that point, if the water has nowhere to go. So maybe that town might need more floodgates or pump stations that can take some of that water out of the streets and get it back into the Bay areas where it needs to be. So those are two small communities that are working class, everyday folks are trying to survive in, and we just want to continue to make sure that they not only just survive, but they thrive. And we need the start of someone to work with us to develop a plan to know how we move forward. So we're just babies in there, knowing we have issues and that issues need to be addressed. Is that a good overview for you?
That was great. Tamira, I mean, one of the questions that I think would be really helpful to unpack is really how the Justice 40% kind of guidelines are running, and what environmental justice is about in the range and intersectional ways that it's being played out. I think that would be useful background for everybody.
Sure. So the Biden-Harris administration passed the Justice 40 initiative in January with some pretty broad guidelines that 40% of federal infrastructure funding would need to reach historically underinvested, what they call disenfranchised communities who are dealing with legacy pollution, environmental justice issues. They sent that to a number of agencies. They identified what they said, initial covered programs. So water, infrastructure, electricity, transportation, and generally this like bucket of community resilience, which can mean lots of things. So they did identify a number of initial existing programs that are called Justice 40 programs. So those agencies have been given till February to come up with plans to make sure that their at least 40% of their funding is going to reach these communities. How that's playing out at individual agencies is very different. I mean, some agencies are further along than others in terms of like doing stakeholder feedback and identifying communities. There's also this big effort to map with this like climate justice screen. I would say that it has, because the amount of money is so great and the opportunity is finite, like who knows what the next administration is going to do. It really has mobilized a number of intermediaries to try and figure out how to ready communities to access federal funding. 40%, I'm not sure how they're gonna really track it, but we're starting to see RFPs like funding opportunities out of federal agencies specifically talk about disenfranchised communities, Black and Brown communities, centering equity as a criteria within the grant. But a lot of it so far is just funding old existing programs. So a lot of DOE, Department of Energy funding, HUD funding, Department of Transportation, Department of Labor, USDA, and EPA funding is going to need to be earmarked for Justice 40 initiative programs. So it's both location and project outcomes are what's really the focus of Justice 40. And I am seeing some like TA grants to help tee up some projects so they can access bigger federal funding. So like EDA has a bunch of the Build Back Better challenge, some LEAP funding out of DOE, which is really trying to ready communities and get some shovel-ready projects lined up. There's also a lot of workforce development funding. What the feds are not good at is like seeing intersectional projects that like incorporate multiple things. So this is a challenge because a lot of our communities, when you're historically under invested in, you don't just have flooding problems, you have transportation problems, you have workforce development problems, you have public housing problems, you have affordability, you have all these issues that are interrelated. And so we're trying to help projects think about developing really comprehensive projects that can probably get funded from multiple sources, as well as leverage other types of capital, whether that be private capital or SBA loans or the philanthropic sector, which is also really following Justice 40, and Bezos Earth Fund is throwing millions of dollars at it. So it is a weird, like we could never get any funding for any of these projects before, but now everybody's like, ooh, resilience hubs and like a disaster mitigation. So now I think it's a moment to really be readying your projects, pay attention to the language you use, like how's, what you're doing addressing historic harm and climate resilience planning and disenfranchised communities, and have the project ready. Like that's the thing I got out of Tobias is like, if you build it, they might come, like if he hadn't had a project already envisioned when EPA called him, he wouldn't have gotten that funding. Like it's really important that you be developing what it is you want, like really getting community vision so that when, you're not like chasing after funding here and there, you have the right project to find the right funding for. I think that's really key, is fit and scale. Like not every project, not every organization should be going after federal funding. It's not easy. It's a heavy lift. It takes a lot of investment to manage and report on these grants. And if what you really need is a small grant to get some pre-project development done, then go after local foundation funding or grant funding, or even like partnering. Like that's the other thing, is because a lot of this funding will go through state and local government, to be talking to your local government, to be thinking about like, are there opportunities to partner where the city's a lead and your organization is a sub-awardee on a project. So what the Justice 40 Accelerator is doing is like trying to provide some TA for project development, and also looking at partners, what we're calling allies, to play an intermediary role that can maybe be a lead on an application. Did you just put this note in here, Jack, around accountability? Oh, this is a big thing. We have lots of projects in urban areas where they're like, we're not working with the city. This is like, we're like, the city will take all the money. Like, you know, it's hard to go from like being maybe in an adversarial relationship to being like, oh, how can we work together? Yeah, this is a major, major challenge. But I think when you have a strong, focused, unified community, doesn't mean you're all the same or you all have the same issue, but like if you can identify 1 or 2 or 3 priorities that the community is unified around, that's going to put a lot more pressure on these local agencies to pay attention and to engage in figuring out how to support projects in your priorities. Yeah. Yeah, Ramapo is in the Justice 40 Accelerator, this first cohort. And it's a coalition of projects, yeah, who have come together, Partnership for Sound and Equity, Groundswell, Elevate, and the Solutions Project. And they have been able to fundraise to be able to bring more folks into new cohorts in the new year. And a lot of this Justice 40 funding is not out yet. It might come out in February when those agencies need to report on it. So getting ready is really key. Assessing your organizational capacity, assessing your partnerships. Are there strategic partnerships you should start cultivating now? Assessing your project, like how well developed is your project? Does it make sense to go after public funding for it? I think it's really important. What we don't want is projects, you know, emailing me, we're applying for this next week. And I'm like, you don't have any of the stuff. It's going to kill you to apply. And then you probably aren't going to get it. So like, you know, knowing the, you know, being able to like match make is really important too. And it's a lot to track. I would say we've been posting federal grant opportunities that we have a strong Justice 40 focus on the Justice 40 Accelerator website. Like that's a good place to be looking. I don't know how many of you are navigating grants.gov. It is not fun to search for funding on that. So I think anywhere you can find out what types of funding is coming your way, get on those listservs. I have no connection to New Jersey. That would have been a better fit, I think, if Scott had asked somebody from New Jersey. So I can't speak to what's going on at the state level there. Yeah. I will say, I said this to other group, that there's an alumni of retired EPA staff called the Environmental Protection Network that provides pro bono services to communities for developing projects, especially that have a key environmental monitoring or environmental policy component. And it's all pro bono, it's all free. They do some matchmaking if you have a project proposal, or they may even be able to suggest funding sources. And they can link you to local EPA alumni who are willing to support and review a project or plan. I would definitely look into them if you're thinking of developing a proposal.
Thank you.
Sure. Do you all belong to the same project? Are you all part of the New Jersey Resource Project? Is that a coalition of?
New Jersey Organizing Project is our C4, our C3 is New Jersey Resource Project. We were created by 9 Sandy survivors 7 years ago to cut through the red tape to try to get people home. And from there, we've expanded out into many other parts. But we're still based in storm recovery, and the members here have stemmed from us, our organization, or they're friends of people who are from our organization. So yes, they're all really New Jersey Organizing Project.
Yeah, and there is lots of FEMA funding that's coming out that is about disaster preparedness.
Well, that I laugh only because there's not one person I know who trusts FEMA.
No, I wouldn't either, but if it's the opportunity to get funds, do it.
And that we're not,
Yeah,
like
but
I said,
then they want it back from you.
we're talking, they're talking a larger scale funding, not just personal funding,
Yeah.
like you would do, Fran.
$35,000 is a lot of money too.
I know, Fran, but Fran is, unfortunately, the state of New Jersey grant program is asking folks to give money back like Fran. So that's where she's talking about the state grant program.
Yeah.
But FEMA, like I said, we are just kindergarten people who know we have these problems and don't know how to move forward with these problems. So we haven't even really addressed a detailed out plan yet to know what to do or how to do it. That's why we came here hoping people can also guide us in ways we need to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking about, I don't know, and Scott might be a good resources, or maybe you, Jack and Kevin, around an intermediate that can pull some of these groups together to think of big picture opportunities.
Yeah, I think what you have provided.
There are some big opportunities and like
Yeah.
the right scale for where they're at and how not to get entangled in kind of the political side of this funding. I just think it's just it's a massive and finite opportunity right now with Justice 40 that might make sense now that everyone's talking about flooding and climate impacts, and there's also a lot of funding for drinking water protection too. So,
and there has to be funding out there for just protection, and I know it's coming. It's just how do we get a hold of it and make sure our towns get what they need.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think what the resources that have been put up, we can help sort of make some sense of it all so that it's not so overwhelming as well. Meaning that, you know, having like a playbook of, all right, step 1, this is what we got to do. Step 2, we're going to do this. So you guys have a nice, clean approach. And then here are the resources and the people that we need to be involved. It sounds sort of elementary, but I think it's critical that we sort of make this cohesive, make it something that you guys drive. Of course, you're the leaders, but we're here to support and guide this through the process, because once you get started, you're going to get sucked into that vortex. And we have to make sure that the government folks are along for the ride as well, because they don't want to be, you know, seen as being overstepped or whatever. So we'll make sure that they're, you know, included and praised when we need to praise them, because that's just what they want. But, you know, I think this has got to be one of those all-in strategies, but having a nice plan with guidelines and the resources to help you pull it off has got to be the key.
That sounds great. And that sounds exactly what we need. And we do know our representatives, local representatives, occasionally need to have that pat on the back and make them feel like they're very important. And I'm okay with that.
They need the pat on the back, but they also need to really listen to people and what they need and what they want.
Exactly, Pat.
Because what I've seen in the time that I've been involved here is, you just go home and don't worry about it. We know what we're doing and we'll take care of everything. We know what you need. Don't tell us what you need. Am I right, John?
You're right.
As John is
maybe
very one-sided government in Waretown, sorry to say.
Yeah. Maybe one of you needs to run for office.
Sorry, I couldn't hear what you said.
I said maybe one of you needs to run for office.
And unfortunately, in South Jersey, most of our coastal towns, we have that good old boy regimes.
Sure.
That unfortunately, and I agree, we need to change how the offices, it need to be change who's in there.
Yeah.
I already ran 3 times. I'm done.
Yeah.
He's running away right now as we speak.
Yeah. I love this. Well, we have about 5 minutes left of the like brainstorming, and I'm wondering if there's, Kevin, thank you for offering like some real tangible next steps and walking away. And I'm also wondering if it makes sense to like identify some ally organizations too that might have a role to play. You know, we are doing some capacity building on demystifying this whole federal funding process too, if that's something that's of value to an organization that's considering either leading or being a subawardee on a grant. I'm happy to share those resources. We're recording all the trainings. We have been able to bring in a lot of federal agency folks to talk about the funding opportunities that are coming. It's just as important for them to hear from you, frontline community folks who are dealing with these issues every day and like really naming the barriers to accessing these funding, because that would be my long-term goal, is that we aren't having to jump through as many hoops, whether they put them out of fire or not, they're still there. So I'm happy to share some of those resources through whoever makes sense, but yeah, we want to make sure communities are being able to make informed decisions about what are the right opportunities for them.
I guess I'm wondering, not knowing really the towns and the mix of generations, but I'm just wondering if there are some high schools, for example, clubs or organizations that are really concerned about global warming. Certainly that's where the energy is coming from so much globally now. And I'm wondering if there's a way of hooking up with them somehow, and maybe some people who have just come out of college and are home right now looking for something important to do. You know, I mean, is there a mix of people who have different talents who you can kind of bring together and bring them into this in a way that could create something more powerful?
Yeah, that's a great thing. Possibly, I didn't think about even students bringing other people into it, but that's something we can look into.
Yeah, and I think, Jack, it would be really great to have like them do a documentary-ish of the issues and make it visible. That might be something that would be really cool for the students to do.
Yeah, even just on their phones, right? Filming the floods and interviewing, you know, the city council person saying we don't know anything about this, you know, whatever. That kind of stuff can really open things up a little bit. Yeah.
We should remember that Yvette Jordan from the other group is with New Caucus, which is an education workers group. And she works with both students and educators in the northern part of the state, but I'm sure she has contacts in the South and is very open to, you know, collaborating.
Excellent.
Unfortunately, I'm taking notes on a piece of paper, so I'm trying to keep up with you.
Well, if people are feeling like the conversation is sort of at its organic end, then maybe people could go take a break and get some water or go to the bathroom, and we could reconvene at 3:45 in a couple minutes, and we'll wait for everyone to get back. And thank you so much, Tamira, for you know, all your help and your guidance. Really wonderful. And we'll see everyone for session 3 in a couple minutes. Tamira, did you want to end with anything? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that.
I'm going to put my email in the chat. People are welcome to reach out to me directly. I'm going to be thinking and chewing on some of this stuff too. I think we have a couple folks in the area that would maybe be able to identify some intermediaries, or at least like maybe some facilitative leadership for process that could be really helpful in getting some kind of cohesion and around like how to engage and what to engage on. with your local government. So I'll be
That would be
thinking
a-
about it. Mhm.
Yeah,
That would be amazing because we're thinking of other sessions, follow-up sessions to
Yes.
continue this process.
Okay.
So it would be wonderful to rely on, to use the resources that you have in those future sessions, if that's a possibility.
Yeah, I will think about how to make that.
I would appreciate, yeah, we would appreciate all that.
Fantastic.
Okay, I'm going to take a
Jillian,
break real
as
quick.
a local, I'm going to urge you
I've been
to
eating.
get a hold of the Bayhead folks, or, because that Barnegat nonprofit, Save Barnegat Bay, you're connected with Bayhead. And you go
Right.
all the way up there. And frankly, that I used to live there, and it's a very active community. They're doing a lot of planning and work and outreach. I think you can learn a lot from the nonprofit, and they have great fundraising efforts, and they're very well connected.
I definitely will get in touch with them. Thank you.
All right, I think you'll all be brought back to the big group automatically, so you can go take a break and we'll come back in a couple minutes.
Thanks, Tamira.
Thank you, Tamira. Thanks a lot.